Welcome to How to Be a Person, a podcast about life with me, your host, Giuliano. Albert, how's it going, my friend?
Great, Giuliano. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate you joining me today. So let's just kind of get into it. Tell me a little bit about yourself and we'll go from there.
I come from a very interesting background. I have a background in psychology, and I come from a large family, Italian family.
Okay.
I'm the youngest of five. I have three brothers and one sister, that are, up about anywhere from 8 to 15 years older than I am.
Okay.
So, I and I come from a lot of cousins, on both sides of the family. So,
Yeah.
I've always come from a very large family. And one of the things that I pride on is I'm a very curious person, and I've always been that way. I'm a thinker by nature.
Mm.
I've always loved reading. I love books. I really am just a curious person. And as a child, I was always chastised, even as an adult, for being nosy. And I like to say, no, I'm just curious. That's just
Mm.
my nature. I like to be curious about how people think, how people act, what makes people tick, and I think that's part of the reason why I was gravitated towards psychology.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny. I feel like as you're describing yourself, you could be describing me and my family too. Like my mom, I'm Italian on both sides. My mom is one of four and my dad is one of four. I grew up with all my cousins and all that stuff. And on the show, that's what I talk about all the time is curiosity. Like I literally, like that's like the main tenet of the show is just being curious and always
Hmm.
exploring. And I found that like, it's funny you said like the people were like, oh, you seem nosy. For me, it's been almost the opposite where I feel like people just tell me things that they never tell other people. And people are like,
Yeah,
how did you get them this? I'm like, I just asked. I don't know. I'm just genuinely curious. So I ask people things that that other people aren't willing to ask.
yeah, and I can relate to that too. I've always been the type where I've had sometimes people will just open up to me, and I don't have to say anything. Sometimes you just sit there and people will just start unloading. I'm like, and that's how I know I'm in the right space. Because
Yes.
obviously, if I'm going to be helping people in any type of way, whether it's coaching or therapy or any type of personal development, there
Yeah.
has to be that comfort there. Otherwise, it's not going
Mm.
to be effective.
Yeah, so true. It's so true. And it is kind of funny how that is. I've kind of pondered on that myself of like, what is it that causes people to open up to me? And I think it's probably a combination of things and not just me, right? But like you said, for yourself, I think part of it is just being willing to ask those, like ask questions of people that
Mhm.
like other people don't ask. And I think part of it as well is just there's something about your presence and like the energy you give off that people feel comfortable and that they trust you and that they're willing to tell you stuff, you know?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, that
When
there has to be that comfort, and that's
Yeah.
one of the biggest, secrets or inside things or any type of coaching success. I mean, it's important, yes, that the coach be well trained, but it doesn't really necessarily matter the method or tools that a coach uses. It's about that comfort, that rapport that
Mm.
the coach has in a sense with the client, and how much willing the client is going to work towards getting that way, getting that result,
Mm.
because
Yeah,
that's
for
part of
sure.
a major area of success.
Mm. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. It's funny you say that because I've talked to other people who are coaches and stuff, and there's nothing wrong with this, but they'll like pride themselves really on their qualifications. And for me, I'm always like, isn't like the whole point of coaching? I mean, which really is just like I feel like what everyone wants, right?
Mhm.
Is like I want to be happier.
Right.
Right, and ultimately like in this moment but also like a pattern of being happier, right, and like making decisions and being the type of person who like the things you do lead to you being happy, right? And in my mind I've always looked at it like that because I do coaching as well and I don't have any like formal certifications. I mean, I've been through some programs and whatever, but I read a lot and I just have this like presence with people and they walk away and they're like, man, I feel so much better. I feel so great, you know, and you're
Yeah,
like, that's the
of
point. That's
course.
the whole point of this, right?
Yeah, and formal training. What I believe in formal training is important, but at the
Yeah.
same time, it's not vital. It's not
Mm.
absolutely crucial. If you look at even like Tony Robbins, I mean, you know, yeah, I mean he
Mm.
just learned by observing people and going to his own taught himself really a lot of the methodology that he learned.
So
In
true.
addition to classes, but it really depends upon the rapport that you have,
Yeah.
because no book and no course is going to really teach you how to really connect to people. I mean, yeah, there's
Mm.
theories about how to connect, and there's a whole host of books about there on rapport building, which are great, but it's all about fundamentally your own ability to connect with people.
Mm.
And at
Yeah,
the
it's
end
so
of the day,
funny.
that's the most therapeutic success.
Oh, for sure, for sure. It's so funny you mentioned Tony Robbins because I was just thinking about him recently, where it's like the way that he learned that he always talks about is like tapes, right? That he was like listening to tapes or whatever, and like cassette tapes, and it makes me think because I'm like, so he basic, and I'm not saying he's self-taught in the sense that he just learned and and did or like
Hmm.
observed and then and learned from that. He also learned from other people.
Right.
And I don't think anyone is like actually self-taught in anything. That's kind of, I feel like that's kind of a misnomer. Like you can't teach yourself
It is.
anything.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I feel like humanity as a whole is really just an accumulation of people who shared their observations with the next generation. And that's why we are where we are. So when people are like, oh, you don't have an official, I mean, I'm not even talking about for me with coaching. I just mean with anything, right? Like, cause I didn't go to college. And so when people talk about it and they're like, you don't have official qualifications or you don't have a degree or you don't have a certification. And I'm like, you do understand that like the only reason they have anything to teach is because someone else took it upon themselves to write it down and be like, hey, this is what I've learned from what I've observed. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's how we
Mhm.
got here in the first place. So you can't make it sound as if like it's something completely different. Like, oh no, this person's officially qualified and oh, you just have experience. Like you're like, dude, that's where everything has come from in the first place, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's really what it boils down to is like the actual street experience, the personal experience. And
Mm.
again, going back to Robbins, I mean, he grew up in from his stories, at least from what he's
Yeah.
saying, he grew up in a completely different environment than he is now,
Yeah.
and the hardship kind of taught him, how to really, push through that and gave him his drive. And
Mm.
that, I think, experience them is the best teacher. I would say experience first and then maybe, other people and books and that would be
Mm.
secondary. But primary, the teacher is going to be your life experience.
Yeah, man, I totally agree with that. I feel like I've always really liked reading, just like you were
Mhm.
talking about before.
Yeah.
And but there's this creator, his name is Dan Coe, and he talks about like kind of like building a business around your interests and things like
Hmm.
that. But one of the things that he's talked about is how like reading just to read is kind of useless. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but he basically is saying that like you should be reading stuff that's relevant to what's happening with you right now. And like that's like the most effective way. And it's kind of funny because I don't I like to just read just to read, but he's not wrong. Like I'm thinking
Yeah.
of all the
No.
times that I've like just tore through a book, like and got through it so fast. It's when it directly applied to my current situation and I was like applying what I was reading. And so I just was like like ripping through the book so fast, you know? And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that actually does make a lot of sense." But I like the idea of like when you read a book that you're able to take someone else's life experience and like just compress it down into like this tiny little thing that you get to read and learn from. But to me, like what makes a book more valuable, in my opinion, than like, like a college degree or something like that, is that you it like adds to your it almost feels like you get to take their experience and add it to your own because it's
Hmm.
always wrapped in like a story of like here's what I went through and XYZ. And so like you get to just pick and choose what you want from it and you go, oh, that makes sense. but it also is delivered in like a way that you feel like you got to live through it as well. Whereas like when I was in school, right, just like normal grade school, high school, it's just like you're just given information and it's like here's the information, and even if it is valuable, it's like I don't remember literally probably like 99% of what I learned in school, and I was like a like top student. Like I got straight A's until I was in like sophomore year or something like that. I had perfect like literally since I was like in first grade through sophomore with like all A's in every class. So I'm just saying like I was a good student, but I literally don't remember like
Yeah,
99% of it all.
yeah, and that's, well, the reason is with learning, it's like either use it or you lose it. And
Mm,
if we don't use 90% of the stuff we learn in secondary and even college. I can say is it's going to go out it's going to go by the wayside.
yeah,
And so that's where, and obviously we can probably talk for hours on how the education system needs to be improved.
sure.
uh there's no secret behind that, but absolutely. And I might, I do definitely, like, I'm not familiar with that creator, but I agree, I can agree with
Mm,
what they're saying in the sense that, you should read for relevant and for learning. And
mm,
that's something I do too, is I pick books that are going to help me out. And, sometimes I will do the escape fiction, Stephen King or James Patterson book from time to time, just to kind of, use a bit of a break in
yeah,
between.
yeah.
But yeah, I would say 90% of what I read is nonfiction,
Mm,
90 to 95%. And most of the stuff, again, is on, self help, business, and
mm,
NLP coaching and the like. So, and I think it's important to read with a mission in mind.
mm,
So, and one of the persons I'm looking is kind of studying now a bit, or listening to some podcasts, is a man by the name of Jim Quick.
okay.
And he talks a lot about like how to retain what you're reading, because that's important too.
Mm,
Because a lot of people, you can say you read 50 to 100 books a year, but in reality, one of the main metrics of reading is, can you remember what you read? Can you teach it to
mm,
somebody else?
yeah.
And most people cannot do that. And a lot of times, myself included, sometimes I'll read a book and a month later I'm like, huh? You know, what was
You're like,
what
I don't
was
even
said?
remember.
Yeah, I don't remember. Which meant that really wasn't that good of a book, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, I think it's important to start reading with intention.
Mm,
And and sometimes it's not always about the quantity of what you read; it's the quality.
mm, yeah.
So even if I read a chapter, but if I digest that chapter and get a lot out of that chapter, versus if I read, a book a week, if I read a chapter a week and that chapter really, I was able to integrate a lot of material from that chapter, I would
Yeah.
say that's probably maybe more superior than that.
Oh, for
And
sure.
I think that may be why, college doesn't really is that effective, because again, a lot of times students have to read, 5, 6, 7 chapters a week,
Mm,
spread
true.
out through the different classes, and it just jumbles.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like your brain can like store it temporarily so
Hmm.
that you can pass a test, but it's not like it's not become part of your identity and something you can tap into throughout your life.
Exactly, because the kids that use it lose it. Okay, I'm going to cram everything in for a test. I
Yep.
take the test, and then now there's a good chance I'm not going to open up the book again. There's a
Yep.
good chance I'm not going to be, looking at or discussing that course material again, unless it's my major, unless it's my field of interest. Other
True.
than that, no. And so even when I've been a professor for 22 years, and I kind of integrate a lot of this. Like, for example, I don't have midterm or final exams.
Mm.
I have unit tests. I don't have midterm or finals,
Oh,
because
interesting.
I don't feel like they do anything except create anxiety. And
Mm.
obviously college is anxiety inducing enough, and so there's nothing like, my role, I like to look at it like, as a professor, is, can I minimize the amount of anxiety that they have?
Mm.
You know, I don't think I'll be able to completely eliminate that, but can I at least, minimize that? So usually we cover about a chapter a week, and that's all I have them read is a chapter
Okay.
a week. And I only, and I spread out the tests where there's multiple. It's not just like one or two or three. There's like
That's gonna
usually
like make
five,
or break.
yeah, five or six. So
Yeah.
that, yeah, I mean, it doesn't make a break. And if you have
Mm.
a bad day, it happens.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
where it's not going to be consequential. I mean, I've had college classes that only had two exams, a midterm and a final. And
Wow.
if you had a bad day on either one of those, you were done. It
Wow.
was over.
Yeah, that's kind of
And
crazy.
that is crazy. And I'm like, I can understand. Yeah, maybe I can understand the value in that, but at the same time, it's doesn't work for me. It
Well,
wouldn't
yeah.
work for me as a professor. So that's sort of like why I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do this. When I'm
Mm,
teaching, I'm not going to put my students through that if it doesn't work for me.
yeah.
So,
Well,
and the
well,
same
'cause
goes for reading.
yeah, I'm sorry. All I was gonna say was like, because really, ultimately, like the point of school is to learn, right? Like the point is like, do you understand this? Like, do you understand the application? Cool, let's move on.
Right.
And there's like no other part of your life where where you have to memorize everything about a subject and be expected to know it at the drop of a hat. Like that's not like even that doesn't prepare you for the real world in
It,
any way. That's
it,
not how the
it,
world works.
it doesn't. And actually, I mean, if you think about it, memorization, like if I walked, like let's say if I was going to give a speech and I memorized it and I walked up there at the podium, there's a good chance that no, because what if somebody asks me a question, or what if
Mhm.
somebody, you know, throws me off for some reason? If I memorize it completely 100%, I'm going to start spazzing out on stage because I'm not going to know where to go next. So it's the
Yeah,
same reason why I even when I give presentations or when I talk at conferences, I have an outline with me.
yeah.
I'll sketch some notes, but I rarely use notes.
Mhm.
Completely. Um, like last year, I gave a conference talk, and I had 5 pages of notes when I walked in there. I think I looked at the notes once, the entire
Mhm.
hour, and I remember sitting there going, like, I just wasted an hour or two prep time of writing
Yeah,
these notes out.
yeah.
And there was times I didn't even look at my notes at all. They were there, but I didn't need it because
Mm,
a lot of it is all about, being, you know, real in the moment.
mm,
And, that's sort of like why, again, I think why our education system isn't exactly where it is today. Because
yeah,
memorization, that's great and all, but where is the learning in that?
yeah, yeah.
You
I
know,
feel like I've heard someone recently talking about how, like, I mean, and this makes sense. Like, information is readily accessible to everyone at all times now. So it's kind of like, what's the point of memorizing things? Really,
right.
what you need to know is the application and how to use that information and how to like think about the information that you're presented with. Like, that is really what matters, you know?
Of course. And that's why, like, I, I even in my classes, like all my, since most of my classes are online, yeah, they have the book to take the exams. However, the questions are set up where you have to apply the information.
Yeah,
So if you don't know the material, you're not going to find the answer verbatim in the book.
yeah.
You're going to have to learn to apply it. So, and that's the key. That's what learning is all about, is being
Mm,
able to apply it. Otherwise, okay, great, you can answer trivia questions on this topic, but where are you learning that? And that's where I'm at. Like, where's the learning in that aspect? So,
Yeah, because being able to recite information or even recall information later on is not even truly a sign of actually having learned it. Like it literally, all that is evidence that you remember it. It doesn't mean that you understand it.
yes, absolutely. And remembering and understanding are two different things. And that's why, like, even when I was in school, we had assignments where we had to read, memorize the Declaration of Independence.
Mm,
Okay, great. Wonderful. Okay, important document. Not gonna lie,
yeah,
but what is that gonna do? Okay, I can get up and say this. Wonderful.
yeah.
Just like as little kids, we would pledge, say the Pledge of Allegiance. Do we know what we're saying? Like,
Mm,
what does it mean to pledge allegiance to a flag? What does that mean? And I
True.
think that's fundamental lesson is more important than the actual words.
Mm,
Making sure we get the right words in the exact order. What are
yeah.
we saying? What's the context behind it?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Hey, it's Giuliano. I'm just popping in here to say how much I appreciate you being here listening and that I hope you're enjoying the show. The more support that the show gets, the more episodes can be produced. If you can only support by sharing it with others or leaving a review, I appreciate that so much. But if you're the type of person who would like to support the show directly, you can do so by visiting howtobeaperson.co and click support the show. Or just click the link in the show notes. Every bit of support means the world to me, and no matter how you choose to support the show, I appreciate you being here listening. I love what I do, and it's because of people like you who listen to the show that I get to keep doing it. Thanks again so much for being here. All right, back to the episode. You know, Al, I feel like you're kind of this interesting combination of like, because, right, like obviously you've been to college, you are a college professor. But also like, I feel like you talk also about, because I remember I was looking at your information, it was like you also talk about like hypnosis and even just this conversation where you're like, yeah, like I learned mostly just from reading books, and you're talking about Tony Robbins and personal development. Those feel like things that are typically like would go against each other. At least that's what I've observed, is like people usually sit in like one of the two camps.
Yeah, it's interesting because being that I've worked, in academia,
Mm-hmm.
uh, a lot of times what I find, and this is maybe what I even find even, someone almost ironic and comedic, is some of the people who are sitting in the different camps and opposed are almost saying the same thing. Sometimes where I'm
Mm.
like, this is interesting. You may be using different terminology or a different vehicle to express it, but you're kind of saying the same thing.
Okay.
And
Can you give me an
um,
example? I'm curious, like specifically.
well, I'll give you an example from a lot of times traditional psychology and NLP disagree a
Okay.
lot. There's camps in NLP that are like that will talk badly about psychologists, and there's
Mm.
people in the psychology camp that'll talk badly about NLP types. So there was a one model of therapy that came up, years ago, was EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is
Yeah.
basically using your eyes in a left to right position or up and down while you're talking about something, because that will rewire and reprocess the experience. Well,
Yeah.
that was initially an NLP technique.
Really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah, it was initially a moving your eyes back and forth.
Mm.
Then it became a proprietary. You had to be a licensed clinical psychologist to even touch your hands on that.
Uh,
And all it is just moving your eyes back and forth while you're talking about something. And I'm just sitting there going like, this is interesting.
yeah.
And I have a background. I do have a background in hypnosis as well as traditional psychology.
Yeah.
And I was at an expo years ago, and it was like one of those like new health, new life expos, and they had all
Okay.
this alternative help. And I walked up to a it was a Christian booth,
Mhm.
and I was looking at some of the books. Some of the book titles looked interesting, and the guy pulled me aside and he said, tell me why you're here. And I said, well, I'm a hypnotist, and his face contorted almost. He's like, I think if this is bad, my method is better. We connect. So, I don't argue with people like that. I listen, because they have a valuable perspective. I'm not going to sit here and dismiss that.
Yeah.
And so finally, he was telling me, oh, every day we give you some exercises on how to connect with the higher power, with Christ. I said, oh, I'm curious. I said, so tell me one of these exercises. He goes, okay, so you sit with your feet flat onto the floor, you close your eyes, you take a couple deep breaths in, and then you just imagine or visualize you speaking to the angels or Jesus. And I went, oh, and I kind of leaned forward and said, that's exactly what I do in hypnosis. That people do. Close their eyes, imagine that they're speaking. And he didn't know what to say. I'm like, and I
Mm.
just walked around, I'm like, see, same thing,
Yeah.
same. argument here,
Mm.
just different ways. And again, it's not that each one is more correct. I usually say now what works for you at the end of the day.
Mm.
Now, for me, another reason is when I was in undergrad, and even in most of my grad studies, I was determined to be a clinical psychologist. That was like going to be my pure one laser focus. A couple of things derailed that. When I was in grad school for my master's degree, I'm specialized in marriage and family therapy. And in that case, we were taught solution focused psychotherapy, which is more quicker, a little bit more blunt, and more thing, which actually the people in NLP were actually getting their inspiration from. So, like
Mm.
Virginia Satir, Milton Erickson, um, Gregory Batson, Fritz Perls, all of those people that are icons in the psychotherapy and communication world.
Okay.
I was studying them, and when I was going from a master's degree, I was like, I really love this approach. And then, when I went back to for my PhD in psychology, initially it was for clinical psych. But what I found, I think what kind of started getting me turned away from that is there were people that were in therapy for 8, 9, 10 plus years. And they were not making much progress. And
Mm.
I'm thinking there has to be a better way here. Yes, I understand that it's not going to be instantaneously, or if there's a lot of issues going on, that it's going to take a while to do, but 10 years?
Mm.
Something's not adding up. And I was hearing multiple of this. I'm like, yeah, I'm not for that. I like more hands-on, um, more rapid forms of change, and that's sort of like why, hypnosis and NLP was more of my area to focus on, because the
Interesting.
change is more rapidly, it's more action orientated. We don't spend much time talking about something; we actually work through it, and that's
Mm.
where I think where coaching is a little bit different than therapy.
Yeah.
Now again, I believe wholeheartedly that they can certainly coexist and should coexist.
Yeah.
Where if somebody's dealing with a lot of deep-seated emotional issues, they should be in therapy. They should seek a therapist. That is important, but at the same time, 8 to 10 years, I'm not. That doesn't sit well with me,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I want to make things clearly when I say this. I don't want to be dogmatic and say this is the way it is. I usually, when I talk about cases like this, I'm like, it doesn't work for me.
Mm. Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
That
That makes
is, and
sense.
I think full stop is everybody is different. And so, and the one thing, when people say like, oh, I tried this approach, it doesn't work for me, I believe it, and
Yeah.
I don't, I believe in the power of hypnosis and NLP to, that's extremely powerful. I
Yeah.
am not, if somebody tells me, that they're full bent on hypnosis doesn't work, I'm not going to argue with them.
Mm.
Because the one thing about the misconception a lot of people have that aren't familiar with hypnosis is that it's mind control. It's not. The one thing that no matter how good of a therapist or coach, we cannot change free will. Like there's not, free will cannot be changed. So if and I've had people come up to me and say, hypnosis doesn't work for me, it will never work. I'm like, okay, all right. I hear you.
Yeah.
And it's different if you were skeptical. Then we'll talk through that. But if you're that bent where it's not going to work with me, just like with people who there's also a misconception that's been around for hundreds of years that hypnosis is evil, a work of the
Mhm.
devil, and
Yeah.
some of
Yeah.
the older religions believe that. But actually, the
Yeah.
Catholic Church approved hypnosis in the late 50s as a method of treatment. But if people,
Interesting.
there's still some people like in the traditional old world
Yeah.
religions that believe that. I'm
Yeah.
not going to debate you.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I hear you.
Yeah. It's interesting
Yeah.
what you said though, because it's like, what it makes me think of is like cars. Like if you had to describe a car to someone, you'd be like, a car has an engine and wheels and it gets me from A to B. But there's so many different types of cars, right? And there's like different trim levels of each car, and there's different brands, and there's different, like they all have different speed, like the speed that they're able to go, the colors, like everything, right? And that's what I was thinking of when you were describing that. It's like, oh, that's really what this is that everyone is finding their own vehicle to get where they want to go. And
Absolutely.
they can look totally different, right? You see someone
You know,
driving a
and I
giant
think
pickup
that's a
truck.
perfect metaphor. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's car is going to look different. Everyone's truck is going to look different. Everyone's vehicle is going to look different.
Yeah.
Our job, I think, as coaches and therapists, is to help make sure that your vehicle is optimized to go where it needs to go.
Yeah.
How it needs to get there is its own path. So one of the things I've always believed, and again, this is sort of like where maybe traditional therapy and NLP may divide with. I believe we have the answers within us. I
Yeah.
think that
I
all of
agree
us
with
have the a compass inside of us.
Yeah.
It may get cloudy at times. It may get blocked, but we all have a compass inside of us that's going to, at the end of the day, take us to where we need to go. The problem is we start ignoring that compass. We don't listen to it anymore. We don't follow it that much. And so I think our goal as coaches is to just help us navigate in that direction again. What that
Yeah.
looks like for everybody is different.
Yeah.
So
You know what I'm curious of, because you would know about this. This has been through my own personal observation, and I'm bringing it up because of what you said about people going to therapy for 10 years and not really making much progress. There's a couple things. First of all, what I've noticed is that I think like going to therapy for a lot of people, it just brings like an awareness instead of like progress, right? It's more just like, oh, I have this thing, or this is what's wrong with me. And this is the second point, is that I feel like it's turned into just like, if you go to an ER and your arm is broken, you're like, my arm is broken. It's like a thing you can point to, like, my arm is broken. And I think what ends up happening is people go to therapy and they're like, hey, you have depression, right? That's like something I've talked about before as an example. Be like, you have depression. And they view it as like, oh, it's like a broken arm. I have it. Like, it's this thing that's happened to me. When in reality, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like mental disorders, like when I looked up and I'm like, I'm trying to fully understand what this means. A disorder is essentially just a collection of symptoms. It is
mhm.
not indicative of like, hey, there's something in you physically wrong that's causing this result. It's just, hey, we've seen these symptoms before. And when these all symptoms coincide, we call it depression. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, well, the American Psychiatric Association has put together a big manual called the Diagnostic
Yes.
and Statistical Manual, the
Yeah.
DSM, and you have to have a certain amount of for any disorder to be diagnosed. You have a certain number of things,
Yeah.
which good, I get it. It's important, but at the same time, that's all it is. It's just a list of things.
Mm.
Um,
Okay, so
doesn't
it's
tell
right. It's
you.
correct. Okay, thank you. That's what I've been trying to
Yeah,
like. Whenever I say this, there's so many, and I mean, I try not to read the comments, but there's so many people in the comments who are like, "This guy's an idiot. He doesn't know how That's not how depression works." Blah blah blah. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it is. Like, I looked this up. Like, that's so. But anyway, part of the reason why I'm bringing this up is because just like you might have like a broken arm, and it's this thing that you can point to that you're like, it's broken, but like you don't just forever have a broken arm, right?
right.
Like, it's not like the rest of your life you have a broken arm. That you go, hey, I have a broken arm. You're like, no, you have a broken arm. You set it. You do what you need to do, and you have it in a cast for a little while, and then you're better. And I feel like that's like it should be treated the same way, where it's like, okay, it's not a physical thing. At least that's my interpretation of it. It's a collection of symptoms. But just like the broken arm, even if you wanted to say it was caused by something physical, okay, well, then let's fix it and move forward, as
Mhm.
opposed to making it part of your identity for the rest of your life. It's just simply a current condition. Just like you might have a broken arm, your arm is currently broken. Oh, you might be depressed, you are currently depressed. And it's like, that doesn't mean that now you have this thing in your mind that, sorry, you're depressed the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Am I correct in saying
Well,
this too?
no,
Like,
and it boils down to your identity, and
mm,
I think sometimes people identify with their disorders, like,
yeah.
it's almost like, depression becomes like part of your name. It's like, hi, I'm depression almost. And
Yeah.
rather than I have depression, I'm going through depression right now.
Mm,
And, one of the things I found, like you were saying, a lot of people sometimes hold on. because there's something in the world called secondary gain if you have a diagnosis sometimes,
Okay.
which means that the diagnosis is doing something for you. You know,
Um,
maybe it's helping you not, being able to not take responsibility or being able to hide from something. And the
yeah.
same thing with physically too, because
Okay.
one of the things I found that going into the wellness and coaching space is that there's some people that really are almost liking having their affliction, because
Mm,
it helps them in some long run. So, and I think that's where we get wrapped up in our identity, which is also another reason why I kind of stepped away from traditional psychology,
hmm.
because everything's about putting a label on somebody, whether it's
Yeah.
ADHD, anxiety. Well, we all have anxiety. We all, I have never met anyone in my life that never had any anxiety or
Yeah.
never's been depressed.
Yeah.
Everybody's been through it, and that's called
Yeah.
life. Now, some people more than others, but
Yeah.
I don't necessarily believe always in labeling and like, okay, slapping a diagnosis.
Mm,
Yes, it's important for treatment, and especially, speaking the elephant in the room, if you want to get insurance to cover your treatment,
you
you
need
have
to
to
get
have a diagnosis.
diagnosed.
There's no way.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of like a double-edged sword there,
Yeah.
in a sense we're labeling. Yes, it's great. It gives some people clarity, but it can also really impact your identity.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming you meant not necessarily consciously that they're like, oh, this is benefiting me, so I want to keep labeling myself. It's
Absolutely.
probably
No,
more of
no,
a
nobody.
subconscious filling of some need that they had
Yeah,
before.
and
And so
that's
they're
why they're going to
latching
hold
onto
on
it.
tight to it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And be
Yeah.
totally resistant because there's some secondary gain there. It's safety, it's
Mm,
security, it's or some sort of hiding, covering up something. So, yeah, it's definitely unconscious, because
yeah.
everybody wants to get better. I mean, they're making the effort, but at the same time, one of the reasons could be if they're stalling all the time, is that's when we have to look under the hood and say, okay,
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
are they
Well,
stalling? You
and
know, what's going on here?
yeah, you know what it makes me think of is because you were talking about taking responsibility, and I think every human being, myself included, in different aspects of my life, I feel like I have this tendency to like be a victim, right? Like
Hmm.
you, it. It's so funny because people be like, "Well, you think someone wants to be a victim?" And you're like, I'm not saying that you want to be victimized, but also when you're a victim, like you are in like a better position than whoever's perpetrating, right? You're like, oh, I'm the victim now, right? Like
Yeah,
you're the like you're like I don't know how to describe it other than that. Like there's a certain validation in being a victim, and when you are the victim, it means that it's not your fault, and it means that you don't have to change anything in order to make it better. You
right.
just have to hope that it's going to get better. And it's like, I don't like that. Even if it's true, this is what's funny is even if it were true that I'm 100% a victim, I still would rather try to take responsibility in some
Yeah.
way and hope that I
Well,
can change it.
and that's the whole thing. Like even in my classes, sometimes when we go over some certain topics, relating to this, I'll have a column in one hand. It'll be like, "Are you a victim or are you a creator?" Because if you're a victim, everything happens to you. Everything happens to
Yeah.
you. And if you're a creator, you take responsibility. Now responsibility does not mean blame. It does not mean
Mm.
some people are just not so nice people. Some people can be jerks in a sense and do
Yeah.
stuff to us.
Yeah.
Um, that's not in our control. However, we can react to it. And I've drawn controversy on this statement too, and I stand by this. Even if you've been victimized in a worst way possible,
Hmm.
there's still a modicum of responsibility on your end
Yeah.
that needs to be addressed for that to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
Whether or not, then that could be something simple of ignoring the signs,
Mm.
being in denial, being enabling the behaviors. Because most of the time, if you look at like a lot of betray when people have been betrayed or been wrong, there were a lot of micro signals
Mm.
leading up to that. that we
Yeah.
tend to ignore. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that,
Yeah.
but then that's where the responsibility comes in. It's like, okay, I let this happen to some level.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And then, once I do that, I can choose how I'm going to move forward with that now.
yeah, absolutely. Well, and like you said, I think what's tough about it is, like you said, people will push back immediately when you talk about this. And it's like, I want to be 100% clear. This is not about blame. Right. And that's,
Absolutely.
I think where the people get tripped
Hmm.
up, because it sounds like, oh, you're victim blaming. You're blaming the victim for what they went through. It's like, no, 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 no.
Not
The
quite.
idea is
No.
that even if it was something that was 100% outside of your control, the moments leading up to this thing were within your control, right? And so it's like, even if you just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, you have to take
Hmm.
responsibility for the fact that you chose to be there, even though you didn't know that that was going to happen, right? It's like your decisions led you to that moment where that thing happened,
Hmm.
right? Whatever it was that was bad that happened to you. And in the moments immediately following that, whatever bad thing happened, you are now also responsible still for yourself. Like the
Yeah.
only thing was that one moment where this thing happened to you that was outside of your control. Everything surrounding it is 100% within your control, which means it's like,
Absolutely. And
okay, so what are you going to do?
and it's not, yeah, I mean, it may sound like, victim blaming, but at the same time, when you take, it's actually quite liberating when you can adopt that perspective. I'm like, this is great. You
Yeah.
know, um, I had a major betrayal by somebody who I, knew for 2 years, of somebody who I'd employed in my agency. This was years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you heard it on paper, this sounded brutal. But I always walk away with saying, like, no, it was and it wasn't.
Mm,
Because there were a lot of things that I look back in, and I'm like, I have to take responsibility here. I'm
mm,
equally as culpable here. Now, yes, I'm not blaming myself here. This is totally on the other person, but I'm have to take some responsibility here, and I
yeah.
have to
Well,
take
yeah.
some part of the onus here. This is and it's clear these are things I was doing that I enabled to happen. So,
Yeah.
but that point I was able to, like, when it happened and when it was the aftermath, I felt like I was in a much better place to build myself back up from it
Mm,
because of that,
yeah.
that knowledge. And so that's where I think, again, responsibility is very important. And I
Mm,
don't, and I feel like sometimes traditional psychology helps people, keeps people in the victim mentality for a
yeah.
period of time. And it doesn't really build, responsibility or accountability there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like I was saying before, it's almost as if, like, when you're diagnosed with something, it's now outside of your hands. It's as if it goes, oh, I'm afflicted with this thing.
Yeah.
That's totally not my responsibility. See, this is my thing, is that I think, and this is my own pattern as well, I think as human beings, we really want things to be black and white. And so you
Right.
want there to be a victim and a perpetrator in
Mm,
every situation. And it's like, that's
absolutely.
it really, what it's so much more nuanced than that, right? Like we want things to be black and white, good and evil, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, it's so much more nuanced than that. Like, but I think part of it too is that that's how we're conditioned, because when you watch TV or movies, right, there's always
Hmm.
a good guy and a bad guy, like always. And there's never, it's never just like, oh, well, that was kind of an interesting mix. That guy he did some bad things, but he was also a really good person. And that person was good, but he lied in that part. You know what I mean? Like, that's not, but that's how life is. Ironically, life
Yeah,
is
well, I
super
mean,
gray.
look at, if you want to look at the classic good guy, bad guy, look at the Batman Joker archetype, and
Yeah.
it's like there's likable qualities on both, for both of them.
Mm.
And and really a good villain is when you can kind of see the good side to them,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
Um, and it's funny because I remember, I grew up watching Nightmare on Elm Street, which is one of, Freddy Krueger. But
Yeah.
if you look at the mythology of Freddy Krueger, he was a man that got badly burned and lost everything in a fire.
Mm.
So, while he's this evil boogeyman, there's also a part of him that's like, wow, this is a man down on his luck. And I feel like that's
Yeah.
brilliant writing right there,
Yeah.
because it
Absolutely.
makes people full dimensional.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, it's Yeah, I don't know. I think that's part of like when you were describing before about what happened with you, that you're like you look at it and you take responsibility for parts of it. I think when you're able to recognize the role that you play in all of the good and quote unquote bad things that you experience in your life, I think that's part of like the doorway into being able to actually appreciate
Mm-hmm.
everything you've been through, regardless of, again, whether it falls into this camp of good or bad that happened. And you're able to look at it and appreciate it and take things from it and like move forward and like have a good life despite it. And sometimes even because of it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's like I'm doing better despite, this. And I think that's a key, because we all like, a person who, you know, steps out of the ashes. I mean, it's like that
Mm,
comeback story. Um, and that reality, because not everything is going to be a Hallmark movie. No one's life is a Hallmark movie. It doesn't just miraculously go towards the end. There's a really rocky path we all go on,
mm,
and that's where I think we connect with people the most. That's why I think millions of people flock to Robbins, because again, he has the underdog story.
yeah.
If he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, I don't think he would be much successful,
Yeah.
because no one can relate. And
I mean,
again,
even if you're saying the same things, that's what's hilarious about it.
yeah,
Like you can literally be saying the correct things and it still won't be like
no,
accepted because of it.
and I'll even go on a little further. I mean, I don't, there's no way to verify that his stories are 100% true or not.
True. Good point. Good point.
I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that it is, but I'm just saying that we don't know that.
Yeah,
But
it's
it's
true.
still that narrative of, you know,
Mm,
nothing was perfect, and I
yeah.
lived this, and now I can tell other people this.
Yeah.
And so I think there's that part of it too, and it's just about taking radical ownership, of and this is gonna be my first curse word, but taking radical ownership of your shit, in
Mm,
a sense, and just your own, you know, things that happen to you, just taking ownership of it and accountability
yeah.
goes a long mile.
Yeah. Well, it's like you said before, it's very freeing. Like it sounds like, oh, you're taking the
Yes.
blame and it sucks, but it's not the blame. And it feels so much better than being a victim because you
Yeah.
realize, oh, wait a second. I not only can I control the actual external outcomes in my life, but I can actually be happy in here. I can control what's happening in here, regardless of what's happening out there. And so you realize all of it is within your control. Everything that happens outside of you is influenceable, and everything that happens in here is within your control, which is
Oh,
everything, right? External and internal. That's it.
exactly. It's all in your control. And when you realize that, again, it's freeing. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, it really is. And, I can control it. And, again, there's that famous expression I've heard some thousands times growing up, and I live by, fool me once, shame on you, but fool me twice, now that's shame on me. So that's the whole thing, that, again, it's all about, okay, this kind of situation, happened. But if I put myself again in that same situation with that same person,
Yeah.
I only have myself to say, yeah, what were you thinking?
Yeah, exactly. If you've been stuck waiting for the right moment to start your business or scale the one you already have, this is for you. OPM Mastery helps entrepreneurs get the capital they need, and you can get pre-qualified in under 2 minutes with no credit check. They've already helped over 1,200 companies secure more than $134 million in funding. Whether you need working capital, financing for real estate, money to purchase equipment, or you're just launching something new, they can help you qualify fast. Just go to funding.howtobeaperson.co or click the link in the show notes to apply now. All right, back to the show. Can you tell me a little bit about NLP, because I feel like I have heard stuff about it over the years and I feel like I kind of looked into it a little bit, but I don't know too much about it. And maybe somebody listening is saying, they're like, you keep saying
Sure.
NLP, what is that?
Sure. Well, NLP stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming, and it's all about using language, using our brains to become a more optimized or better human being.
Okay.
It's sort of like using, it almost operates on the programming, computer programming thing, how we
Okay.
can program ourselves to be a better person, a better
Yeah.
human being. So initially, the founders, named by two men by the name of Richard Bandler and John Grinder, in the early to mid 70s, wanted to come up with a way of how do we model or how do we get people to be excellent. At that time they were studying the great therapists and the great communicators of the past. So what do we need to do? We need to look fundamentally and model what they're doing,
Mm.
modeling the greats. So we started adopting the language, adopting their style.
Mm.
So for example, if I'm working with someone who wants to be confident and gain more
Okay.
confidence, so one of the things we might start looking at, instead of like, oh, well, you need to think more confidently. Great, but let's start your physicality. What does a confident person do? They stand up tall with their shoulders back. Okay, let's practice that first.
Mm.
Or let's stand, let's do a power pose. Let's do that first.
Mm.
And then how does a confident person communicate? They smile, they use eye contact. Okay, now we're going to add that layer in there. And
Mm.
so now we're programming you, because what will often happen is once we match the physical, the mental is going to catch right up.
Mm. You know what it
So
feels like to me? So I love what your description, and I now I feel like I understand it better. What it feels like to me is that it's essentially like a cycle, and you can jump in at any point and influence the cycle. And so, like, for some people, it's like your thoughts. Okay, cool. Let's influence your thoughts, and then you'll act different, and that'll reinforce those thoughts, and it'll keep you going in this direction. It's like,
absolutely.
or like you said, it's like, well, let's jump into the actions. Let's change the actions and
Yeah.
like how you're showing up, and that'll influence then your thoughts, which will then reinforce those actions and blah blah blah. Like it's just
And
this
now
cycle where
your
you can.
behavior and now be much more influential. The first
Interesting.
thing we need to do is change the inner world before we can change the outer world.
Mm.
So, and I've been to a lot of like trainings where it's like how to be more influential, how to be more charismatic, how to be more persuasive. And a good part of it, which may disappoint some people initially, is inner work, like working on yourself,
Yeah.
because that is so important. You cannot be magnetically or charismatic if you're feeling like crap, if
Mm.
you're insecure, if you're not in a good mental state. And so again, it's kind of like programming that. So like another thing is like I'm working with a student taking an exam. A good NLP technique would be to visualize themselves taking the exam beforehand. And then not only just getting the results, but answering each question. Imagine himself looking at each question and the answer coming to them in an easier way, in a very easy way. Um, that would be an example. Or like, an athlete having them imagine the event beforehand.
Yeah.
Also, your state control whenever you do something. So, another
Mm.
NLP technique would be if somebody is about to do something that they're nervous about, giving a public speech. So, maybe 5 minutes before you're about to start, you recall a time in your mind where one of your best moments of your life, and you really associate in that moment. So now you live it, you see it, you hear it, feel it, and let that feeling build in your body. And now, when you go to give that speech, you're going to be in a much stronger emotional state. And I
Mm.
guarantee much more charismatic, much more, on the go. And it was just a simple tweak that we changed in programming. So
Yeah.
that's sort of like what NLP is. It's very,
Interesting.
it's not mystical. A lot of people sometimes assume it's woo woo or nefarious. And yeah, there are some people who may use it for nefarious reasons, but it's really about modeling human excellence,
Mm. Yeah.
and what makes an excellent person to do that.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. I feel like there's so many of those things that I've heard on their own that I didn't realize fell under that window of NLP. And I'm like, oh, like every example you gave, I'm already familiar with. I'm like, oh, so I guess I am familiar with NLP. I
Yeah,
just didn't
I think a
realize.
lot of people are, and even when I was learning, I'm like, well, this is it, because everyone's so making this go COVID. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, we do this every day, And the same thing with hypnosis, because a lot of people feel when they hear the word hypnosis, they think of people clucking like a chicken or
Mm,
working under a spell. But we go through hypnosis all the time. If any of you who drives, if you've driven, sometimes an hour or 45 minutes, and let's say it's a route you're very familiar with, you may notice you get in the car and suddenly you're there. And it's like,
mm,
what happened? Well, you went into a trance.
mm.
Your subconscious mind took care of the driving because it knows, how to drive and how to look out, but you went on a trance. Or
Interesting.
another example is we watch a movie. We sit down, for an hour and a half, 2 hours to watch a movie. Now we know when we're about to sit down, what we're watching is fake. Our conscious and rational mind knows what we're watching is fake. It's a
Mm.
movie, it's a TV show, it's fiction. But yet we get moved, we cry, we get angry, we
Yeah, we feel
laugh,
the emotions.
we feel the emotions, and yet it's fake.
Ah,
So, but we temporarily, go into a trance, and we start we're there with the character.
interesting.
Um, and that sort of another thing too. Same thing with suggestion. If you come home, let's say you come home from a day at work, and your partner or spouse tells you, you look tired today. Man, you really look tired. And all of a sudden now you'll see the person start yawning and be like, I really am. I'm like, but did you realize you were tired 30 seconds ago? Most
Mm,
likely not. It was that language that you heard
interesting.
that suddenly turned your mind to it.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, I think the movie thing is and TV shows is a great example of it because so many people and the driving, obviously, both of those are really good examples. But I remember someone saying a while back that like they are really careful about what they watch for that exact reason. Because
Hmm.
like you said, it's kind of like they like you feel like you're living it. And
Yeah.
if you were to do if you were like, hey, I'm gonna go get, hypnotized to improve my life, it's like, well, realize that you're already doing that in
Yeah.
certain areas of your life and it's pushing you in that direction without you even realizing it. So you might have to
And
unlock
this
it
is
back.
not necessarily a political observation, but you want to know the best hypnotists out there? The media. That's the best hypnotist I
Mm,
think ever,
really?
or the media. Yeah.
Can you explain it?
Well, again, it's not an indication of how you're feeling, but look at the pandemic, how people,
Okay.
responded from what they heard on the media. People were glued to the media
Mm,
and were adopting whatever the media had told them to do.
uh,
Fear, whether it was fear, whether it was, taking more proactive with their health
yeah.
because somebody told them to do that.
So what qualifies as like hypnosis then? Is it just that when you're in a state of being able to receive information and then it
It's being
influences
being
you?
suggestible, really, and being suggestible and being open. That's
Okay.
really all hypnosis is. Is just really suggestibility, being
Mm,
suggested, being able to learn. So everybody can be hypnotized because if you weren't suggestible, you couldn't learn. So,
yeah. Yeah.
there's no such thing as somebody say I can't be hypnotized. We all are. The key
Uh,
is wanting to be and being engaged in it at the moment, and
interesting.
conscious of that engagement.
So
So
hypnotism is really not even separate from learning or being
exactly,
influenced in any way.
it's
It's
any type
probably
of
just a more
influence, any type of learning.
concentrated it was like a more concentrated version of it essentially.
Yeah,
Because
the
you're like,
only
I am
thing we're
purposely
doing it
trying to
by
do that.
design. I'm putting you in a flow state by design. By
Mm,
having you either not necessarily relax, because another thing about hypnosis, you don't need relaxation. You don't at all for it to be
mm.
effective. The
Okay,
media example, you're not.
great. Yeah,
Um,
great point.
so you don't need to be relaxed to be hypnotized, and that's another thing I think a lot of people are misconceived about. So, commercials, we're hip. Um, commercials do it all the time. They're great. Another source of thing. You see, now a good hypnosis or a good experience of hypnosis is it's really about implanting an idea into somebody's head,
Mhm.
but making them think it's their own idea.
Mm,
So again, let's say you're playing a video game and all of a sudden you see McDonald's flash by you for a split second. An hour later, you're like, I'm hungry. I think I'm gonna move for McDonald's. Now, you think you're in the mood for McDonald's? Not quite.
Mm.
And that's it went below your perception. And so that's where a lot of things too. There was an ad years ago, local ad in Florida, one of the car dealerships. Every car dealership will usually have commercials like, "Oh, buy this car, buy this car."
Yeah.
And this one dealership tried something very novel, which I thought was brilliant. They had, of course, the announcer announcing all these cars on sale, but then they had, you know, a basketball player that was like over 6'5", in a bird suit, like a big bird doing a chicken dance. And now of course everyone's paying attention consciously to
Yeah.
that bird doing a chicken dance,
Yeah.
and not necessarily paying attention to, but they were subconsciously in the background. So now all of a
Mm.
sudden, it's like, I'm in a mood for a car. Let me try this dealership here. I went to
Mm.
that exact dealership. Again, you think it's your own idea.
Interesting. Interesting. Well,
So
that's why you say like that's like some people can use it for nefarious purposes because ultimately we're all suggestible. And if you provide enough suggestion, even if it's not overt, you can influence people to make different decisions.
absolutely.
Essentially against their own will. And like you said, the news is like a really good example of that. Even just like this, it feels just like also marketing, like just marketing and advertising in general is doing
Oh,
that.
100%. And
Yeah.
that the media, marketing, advertising, wonderful hypnotists.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Interesting.
And it's, again, it's all about your control. It's all about, there's nothing mystical or magical about it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey,
it looks interesting because, again, what we see on TV or
yeah, of course, of course. One thing, Al, that I wanted to ask you about, it's a little bit different from what we've been talking about, but you mentioned having an agency.
yes. So I work with actors, and one of the reasons why I became sort of like, a really well versed in the idea of self sabotage and self defeating behavior is because, I work with thousands of actors, in addition over the past 22 years.
Okay.
And the one thing I've seen so many actors do is self sabotage.
Okay.
And that's like being their own worst enemy.
Mm.
And taking themselves out of the competition.
Like how?
So it could be not showing up for auditions, not being fully prepared,
Mm.
being slow to respond back to people,
Mm.
slow to be applying for jobs, and a lot of that comes from fear. A lot of that comes from being in an industry that is immensely competitive. You're talking with show business is one of the most competitive industries out there.
Mm.
You're talking, several, 100,000. There's several hundred thousands of actors, so maybe like 700,000 actors at any given time in the United States.
Yeah.
There's only a small handful of jobs, so
Yeah.
almost 97 to 98% of them are going to be out of work most of the time. It's
Interesting.
not strong odds. So most likely the actor is going to be told no, no, much more than they're going to be told yes.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of this business.
Yeah.
And so there has to be a bit of resiliency or a bit of grit, if you want to say that has to be able to move forward and carry through all of that.
Mm.
And I think a lot of times actors, they come out of, conservatory, or drama school, and they're, young, and they got their bright. They see the, either the lights on Broadway or the lights on the, Hollywood sign. And it's definitely intoxicating,
Yeah.
and exciting. Yes, I get that. But then the reality is that, you're not going to be nailing every audition you're going to be getting, so, months and months sometimes getting no's with no job is going to add up over time.
Yeah, for sure. Do you still have this agency?
Yes, I do.
Oh, that's cool. Well, so part of the reason I'm asking this too is because I'm actually a commercial actor, and I have an agent, and so I can kind of comment on some of that experience. And like for me, um, like I see what you're talking about, and like
Hmm.
actually was one of my more recent guests. I was just talking to him about this, where the the job that I got most recently, I was getting paid $1,000 a day,
Hmm.
and I had never had. I mean, I've had businesses where I've made more than that in a day, but like I never had someone like pay me like for a job $1,000 a day, and I remember like I wouldn't say that I was ever actually seriously considering backing out of it, but I remember just thinking like, oh, I don't know if I could do this. Like, I don't know, because
Hmm.
it was like a really like in-depth thing that had a lot of lines, and I was like, I don't know if I could do. And what's funny is I find out like later that it was like, oh yeah, we have a teleprompter, you don't have to worry about the lines. And I was like, oh
Yeah.
okay. Like that's hilarious because I was gonna back out because of that. But you know what I mean. And so it's like it's funny how that can be like your my point is like all of everything that we've been talking about, where it's like your external world, like the results you get in your life are in direct correlation to your own like internal world and how you view
Yeah.
yourself. And it's like I had this opportunity to make $1,000 a day, and I did, which was great. It was like 4 days of work, so that was awesome. But like there was a part of me that like wanted to back out of this thing when I was perfectly qualified. I did an awesome job. Like when I was actually on
And I
set,
believe that,
you know what I mean? It's
and
like, wow.
well, that happens a lot. I've seen so many actors that will choke, literally metaphorically choke when
Yeah.
they get, because I do work on some commercials, but I'm mainly theatrical. So
Mm,
I've had clients who've had series regular come close to series regulars, booking a
mm,
series regular, and right when they're in the callback or what they call the screen test, they're almost, I have sometimes have to talk them out of backing out. Like, no. And I'm
wow.
like, if you think about it, I'm like, isn't this what you want? Yeah.
Hello.
I mean, you would think that, but there's a lot of expectations because
Mm,
it's fear of success that comes in. Because again, it's
mm.
now your life is going to change. Now it's getting real.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes you don't realize. So here's what's funny. For a very long time, when people talk about fear of success, I was always like, what are you talking about? Stop. Like, I want to be successful. Right. Like, I remember for a long time. And I think until you actually get to that ceiling where you're pushing on the ceiling, like, you don't realize that you have it until you
Yeah.
get to, because there have been times, like I said, I've made decent money and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't
Right.
have that. And, but
Well,
this time I was like, oh, I see it. Like, I have
yeah.
this idea in my head that someone, you know, like I said, I've had businesses where I've made more. So it was different. It was like an accumulation of sales within a time period. So that's different. This was like someone else is valuing my day at $1,000. And it's like, it was this ceiling where it just felt like wrong. It was like, what do you mean? Like, how is it possible that my time can be worth $1,000 a day? Like
Yeah.
it was this, it's this weird
Well,
thing. Like you said, it's this fear of success almost. And
yeah.
like,
Well,
I
you're
think until
seeing
you
things
hit
a
that, you don't
different
realize
way.
it.
You
What,
know,
say it again?
you're seeing things a different way now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
fear of success is one of those fears that are not conscious. So that's why no one can see that. Everybody wants it.
Mm,
Everyone's chasing success out there.
yeah.
So nobody, it should sound like absurd when you think about it for the first time.
Yeah.
But it really boils down to fear of change. In this
Mm,
case, in your situation, it sounds like, okay, you're getting paid in a different context now,
yeah.
a
Yeah.
different way.
Yeah.
Um, or if, again, landing that life changing role or getting that major promotion, your life is going to change. So nothing's going to stay the same. And
Mm,
that's where people freak out on, because
yeah.
it's like, okay, wow, things can change at any given moment.
Mm. It's so true. You know what's funny? I will say for me, it's funny because this is something that I've talked about a lot is that I actually really love change. So I'm not sure if that's what it was for me. Like I've moved
Yeah.
across the country like 5 times. I rearrange my furniture every few months. Like I've moved a million times, even within each place where I've lived. Like I feel like I thrive on change and I like
Yeah.
crave it.
Well, I mean,
Um,
it's also fear of something new.
yeah.
In this case it was your first time where somebody else was paying you, and it was not 100% in your control. Whereas in your business,
Mm,
you're in your wheelhouse,
Yes.
and you're
Yes.
able to, control it. Whereas
Yeah.
now I'm not in control. I'm dependent, on other people.
Yeah.
So there's a whole lot of elements there, and that's where you have to be honest with yourself, because a lot of times how fear success can show up is like, oh, I don't really think this opportunity is worth it. I'm too tired today. I'm not going to
Mm,
pursue it. And then your conscious, rational mind comes up with so many excuses that are
yeah.
valid, but why you shouldn't do it. And that's where it's
Yeah.
like sometimes we have to go deeper here.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You know what I'm curious about? Because I've only been in the like the commercial side of things and not the theatric side. Um, one thing like that I noticed being in this world is that you like what I decided from the beginning was like I'm just gonna have fun.
Hmm.
And the reason I decided that was because I realized when you submit, like even when they're like, "Hey, we want an audition," when you audition, they never told me if I didn't get it. And it
Right.
was like they never inform you. You just wait forever, basically. And so I was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I can't live like that. Like I need to just do this and just be like, hey, I'm just gonna have fun while I'm doing it and just forget about it. And
Well,
so now when I get a role, it's like a surprise. I get an email and they're like, congrats, like they want to check to see if you're still available these dates. I'm like, oh damn. I'm like, nice,
yeah.
I forgot about that thing, you know?
Well,
Is it the same in the
and
theatric side? Do they not tell
I
you?
would have it should be. That's the way it should be. And that's what I kind of advise people, actors, to do. To have
Okay.
that mentality. Because when you walk into the audition overthinking, oh, I better get this, I better get this, I better get this.
Mm,
Your conscious mind is taking over, and then there's a good chance that you're going to freeze on some level when it
mm,
comes to a time to auditioning, which is then going to lower the quality of the audition,
yeah.
and that's going to take you out of the running.
Yeah.
So one of the things I hear a lot of working actors, those that are very successful, they may not be A-list because there's a lot of actors that are working actors, meaning that they're on
Mm,
stage all the time. They're on, bit parts in TV. You may not know their name, but you see them in almost every thing.
yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of them, what they adopt the mentality of, when you have that self-tape or when you have that audition, you have 2 minutes, or under, or whatever that is amount of time.
Yeah.
This is a time where you as an actor get to showcase what you can do.
Mm.
You want to, most actors do it because they love creating, they love embodying a character. Okay, now here's your 2 minute chance. This is not necessarily, well, it is an audition, but this is not an audition. Don't look at it as an audition, but this is your
Mm.
opportunity to perform and give it
Mm.
your all. And then as soon as it's over, you let it go. You let it go in your
Yeah.
mind
Like
because,
this is what you're here to do is act, right?
yeah, exactly. So
That's
do
what
what
this
you
is.
love. And the rest, if it works out, great. That's extra. It's an extra, cherry on top if you do
Yeah.
that. But at the same time, if you don't do it, you still had something. You're still doing what you love.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
when you're not attached to the outcome so much, it takes a lot of pressure off, which is
Yeah.
going to enhance your performance. Which is hence why I think these actors are working all the time because
Yeah.
of that,
You know
mentality.
you know what's
So
funny is I feel like a lot of the roles that I've gotten, like a decent percentage of them are ones that I actually kind of didn't want. And like I kind of felt silly like with what they were asking me to do for the audition, and I was just like, well, whatever, like I don't even want to do this. And
yeah.
so like though it's what's so like those are the ones that they were like, that was great, like we want you to do it. And I'm like, are you serious? But it's just proof of what you said. It's like when you're caught up in like, oh, I really want this thing, it's like you bring a different energy to what you're doing. When
Mhm.
you're actually detached from the outcome, you end up just showing up better because you're like, I literally don't care what happens, I'm just doing this because I guess it's kind of fun, you know?
Exactly, and that's exactly it. You're doing what you love, and that at the end of the day, that's what you're there to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And
So did you say with theatrical, do they tell you if you don't get it?
not very rarely.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good then. That's good because
Yeah,
honestly, like I said, to me, at first I didn't like that because it felt like applying for a job and going for an interview and then they just never call you. So
yeah,
like I was like, this is kind of bogus that they don't tell you. But then
yeah.
I came to appreciate it. I was like, actually, you know what? This is great because I actually do not do very well with rejection. Like I really don't. I've
Yeah.
had sales jobs where like I would get like a high volume of rejection, and I would quit so quickly because it was just
Yeah.
so hard.
Well,
And with
you
this, I'm
know,
like, I get no rejection. It's literally zero because I just do I just literally submit the self tape and then go live my life. And like
mhm.
to me, it's like zero rejection because I never find out if they said no.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why my heart goes out to anybody who's a telemarketer. That's got to, be a job that's,
I know. I know.
I feel bad, for all telemarketers because, man, but, I take risks. But yeah, I mean, when you attach a no stakes mindset, like
Mm,
there's no stakes here, low stakes, no stakes. It's going to be better. You're going to be given much better performance. You're going to be
mm,
more relaxed, and you're not going to be in your head.
yeah.
And a lot of my critiques, because I go to a lot of showcases, and I which I offer both written and verbal critique to actors. And usually the biggest critique that I often give, and I find myself giving consistently, is get out of your head.
Mm,
Because what very often what good acting is all about listening to, and
mm,
not just acting, but a lot of times when people, and this happens in normal conversations too, where it comes off disingenuous because very often you may look like you're listening, but all you're doing is figuring out what am I going to say next,
yep. Yep.
and you're
That was
not
a life
connecting to the
hack,
person in
man.
front of you. Yeah.
That was a life hack, man, when I learned that. I remember when the first, that might have been in Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. It might have been in there. I don't remember when I first found out. And I was just like, oh my God, like that's exactly what I do. Like when the other person's talking and I'm thinking about what's the next thing I'm going to say. And like just learning to like listen, man, it's changed the game. But you know what's really
Oh,
funny? Like what you were talking about, like when we're talking about acting right now, but I feel like this is life as well. Like when you
100%.
when you realize that like they're just no, like you said, this no stakes game. Like if you approach life like whatever, like it's fine. Whatever happens is gonna happen. Like I'm okay with it no matter what. Um, Life is just better, and it ironically you get better outcomes from it too. It's just so funny.
Yeah.
Oh man, Al, you know what's funny? Man? I feel like we could probably talk for like 5 hours.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
but
And
this
this
has
has
been
been
a great
great.
conversation, man. I love it. And
Yeah, I did really enjoy this, and I'm
yeah.
glad.
So if anybody listening wants to connect with you,
So
how can they
you
do
can
so?
find me on LinkedIn. You can also find me on Instagram. I'm at Dr. Al Bramante. Feel free to reach out to me there. You can also go to my website, albertbramante.com, and I'd be happy to, continue in this conversation.
Awesome. Awesome. And I'll be sure to, put the links to all that stuff in the show notes as well. Al, like I said, man, great conversation. I really, really appreciate you coming on the show, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Okay. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who'd appreciate it. For everything I have to offer, visit howtobeaperson.co.